If our first group of candidates could please come to the stage, that would be great. Mr. Schroeder, are you here?
Should we put Ginsburg up into the scroobies right there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sam, make sure you have the sign first. Yeah.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, I think there's an extra one. I think we're just going to proceed.
No, I think they're going to move.
But that may all change at the convention. It's an interesting part.
Mr. Ginsburg will be joining us. He'll turn it on.
Welcome. Before we get started, since we are right up here on stage next to this American flag, how about we do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now that most of the other folks have sat down, elected officials in the audience, would you mind standing so we can recognize you? Thank you for your service.
Cheers. Thank you.
Welcome to Fossil Ridge High School for the 2018 Northern Colorado Gubernatorial Forum. My name is Sam Hodeling, and I stand here today on behalf of our steering committee, who put in many hours to make today's session a reality. This group includes Andrew Bondi, Tom List, Karen Artell, Aaron Bergquist, Reed Hayhow, Mandy Zock, and Suzanne Trask, representing the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare, Indivisible NOCO, Northern Colorado Now, OFA Colorado, the Poudre Education Association, and the Strayer Center for Public Service Leadership at CSU, which is, of course, my entity, so I can mess it up. This event would not have been possible without all of our contributions. For the last year, I've had the pleasure of running the newly formed Strayer Center, a new initiative at CSU dedicated to fostering a passion for public service and civic leadership in our students, in our community, and in our state. Thank you all for taking the time out of your Saturday, especially on such a beautiful spring Saturday, to come and hear from 11 candidates who are running to be the next governor of the state of Colorado. And thank you, candidates, for taking the long journey up I-25 so that we in Fort Collins and Northern Colorado can hear directly from you. Strong democracies require an informed and engaged citizenry. The forum today will be moderated by Dr. Kyle Saunders of the CSU Political Science Department, thank you, Kyle, and Nick Coltrane of the Fort Collins, Coloradoan, thank you, Nick. Thank you both for the time you invested into this event, as well as the guidance of Dr. John Strayer in the development of the forum, as well as just my general life and the center. Many of you in the audience probably had John as a teacher at one point, so afterwards, come and give him a hard time. He misses all of you. In developing this session, our steering committee was passionate about including community involvement and having representation across the political spectrum. All candidates running for governor were invited to join us, and questions were solicited directly from our community. The candidates have been randomly assigned into 2 groups, and each group will have roughly 1 hour to answer 4 to 6 questions, depending on time, with a 5-minute intermission in between. Please hold all applause and cheering, remain respectful at all times, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. So just a little bit more about the format. We'll run through a series of questions for the candidates. We'll tell them whether they have 2 minutes or 1 minute. Candidates, you will have a timekeeper down here. You'll get a yellow signal when you have 30 seconds remaining. Red will signal your time is up, okay? If you continue to speak, we will start talking to you and interrupting you. Just warning you in advance. And again, since this is a forum and it is meant to be a bipartisan, multi-partisan forum, we would ask that you refrain from back and forth between the candidates as well as in the audience. Please be respectful and let's have a fun, informative time, okay? Great. So to begin, our first question, and this is for all of you, and you'll have 2 minutes.
We're going to do introduction.
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and all of those things. So, let's go ahead and do an introduction, and then because I had a question for you that was going to be an introduction, but let's do that anyway. Start with Ms. Kennedy, and we will move on from there, please.
Good afternoon, Larimer County. It's great to be here. My name is Carrie Kennedy. It's a real privilege to be here as a candidate for governor. It's been a privilege for me to be a part of Colorado's leadership team, including serving as your state treasurer, a position I was elected to in 2006 statewide. We are proud of our state. We are proud of Colorado's progress. We are an innovative and forward-looking state. We built one of the top economies in the country. I'm proud to have been a part of the leadership team that has helped lay the foundation for that success. And I'm running for governor to continue the great work that we're doing here in our state to make sure that our progress reaches everyone. Because as you all know, there are a lot of people in our state who aren't benefiting from our progress. And to keep Colorado the place that we all love. I've been managing your tax money. We've been able to keep Colorado on good, strong financial footing. I helped balance the budget throughout the economic crisis. And as your state treasurer, I got your state tax dollars out of some risky Wall Street investments ahead of the crash so that we avoided the losses here in public funds that other states incurred. I believe there are 3 things that we need to do here in Colorado. The first one is we need to make public education our state's #1 priority. It doesn't make any sense that we got the top-ranked economy in the country and we rank at the bottom in the investment in our K-12 system and our higher education system. I grew up with 3 brothers and sisters who joined my family through the foster care program. And I also have a sister who joined my family through her church. So my brothers and sisters didn't have the opportunities I had, and I saw firsthand how important opportunities are we give kids through their public schools. Second, we need to make healthcare accessible and affordable for everyone, which is why I am calling on Colorado to offer a public health insurance option. And finally, we need to protect this beautiful state Turns out people all over the country love Colorado as much as we do, and a lot of them are moving here. You will see me work to protect our open space, our public lands, our air quality, our water quality, and lead to make sure Colorado meets the emissions reductions targets that are in the Paris Climate Agreement. Thank you so much. I would appreciate your support in this race.
Very good. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here for just a second. Our first question was actually going to be, why should you be the next governor of Colorado? So that is exactly the question I'm going to ask the candidates to do in their introduction. So, Mr. Lopez, if you would, 2 minutes, please.
Well, good afternoon. You know, it's a pleasure to be here. You know, a lot of people have asked me, why are you running for governor? And my answer is that I want to create a better life for you and your family. You see, I truly believe that all Coloradans want to live in a place, in a state, where life is better, richer, and fuller for all of us. I believe we deserve a governor that truly understands that there are 64 counties in the state. And his job is to promote, protect, preserve the various economies and the different ways of life that make Colorado the great state that it is. Now, let me tell you a little about myself. I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled vet. I lost 87% hearing in my right ear due to jet engine noises, but that's okay because that's where I met my soulmate, my lovely wife of 30 years, Lisa. You know, we have a son that's 27, we have a daughter that's 24. I'm a former mayor. I'm the mayor of Parker, Colorado. How many of you are familiar with Parker? You know, I was very fortunate. Not only was I the mayor, but I was the city manager as well. So I learned all there was to learn about transportation. I served on E470, Denver Regional Council of Governments. I understand water, understand air quality, regional transportation, regional development, and so forth. I'm the former president of the Denver Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm the former director of the United States Small Business Administration here in Colorado. And under my administration, I was able to garner $2.9 billion in loans to small business, $4.6 billion in federal contracts, 45 to 46,000 jobs. Now, the three issues that I have is small business. Small business is the heart and soul of any economy and the heart and soul of any community. And we need to make sure that small business thrives and succeeds. The other is education. You know, not everybody's going to go to college. Not everybody can afford to go to college. We got to make sure that those young men and women that can't go to college can still achieve the American dream by giving them vocational and technical training. And the last thing that I want to look at is fraud, waste, and abuse in the state. My name is Greg Lopez. I'm running for governor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Helker.
Hi, my name is Scott Helker, and I'm seeking the Libertarian nomination for governor at this point. I want to thank you all for inviting me here and for coming out. The Libertarian Party basically stands for limited government, and we feel that the best way to grow the economy, to improve education, is to get government out of it as much as possible. That's not always going to be possible, but where there is government, it should be excellent. Example, I'm from Jefferson County. In Jefferson County, there is one school that produces more millionaires than any other school. And that's all anecdotal. We can't prove that yet. That school is Warren Tech. The reason why? Small businesses. They go out, they start small businesses. Over time, they become very wealthy at it. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Again, it's important to know where things are coming from. We have two schools in Jefferson County that produce 80% graduation rates who go to college. Of those two schools, 80% of the kids who go to college actually graduate. What are they doing different from all the other schools? Nobody knows. We don't study it. I find this over and over again in government. My main goal would be to find, maybe through a Six Sigma program, a way of looking for excellence in government, and then a way to limit the government that we can't make excellent. Thank you very much. Scott Hilker, Libertarian candidate.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor Lynn.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for taking a wonderful day out of your life to come and listen to us, because the most important thing is that you are all engaged and you vote. I am the Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, and I'm asking just for a logical one-step promotion. I'd like to be promoted. And I think that's important because anybody can run for office. But you want to have not only a leader who's led large organizations, but who deals with the complexity of what we deal with every day in the state of Colorado. I think we have a little problem in Washington. We have a leader who didn't follow that logical path, and I would argue that it is important to understand not only how to work with the legislature, which is what a governor has to do, and I do it every day, but how to lead a large organization like the state of Colorado, which is a $30 billion budget with 31,000 employees. As I've said to some people, this is not a tryout job. So it's been my honor to serve Governor Hickenlooper as not only the lieutenant governor, but the chief operating officer for the state. So all those departments and all that complexity reports directly to me. So how did I get here? Why am I standing here? Why do I want to be your governor? Both my parents were in the Navy. My dad was a 20-year Navy career man. My mother was a wave in World War II, and service really was part of my DNA. I made a conscious decision to go to school, to learn how to govern, and worked in Washington, worked in New York City at the municipal level, and worked here in Colorado. I spent 20 years of my life also in the private sector doing health care, and I've been fighting the repeal of the Affordable Care Act with Governor Hickenlooper for the last year. I've traveled to all 64 counties as your lieutenant governor, and I hear three things. I hear health care, I hear housing, and I hear our infrastructure. Those will be the three issues that I will tackle if you give me this honor. Thank you very much.
My name is Noel Ginsberg, one of the many people running for governor. We can't get us all on the same stage at one time. I'm a Colorado native. I grew up working in my dad's pickle plant, which is where I fell in love with manufacturing and the people that I worked with. So it's no surprise that in my junior year at DU, I actually did a business plan and started the company I run today, Intertech, in my junior year. But when I went into business, it wasn't just to make a living. It was to make a difference. 30 years ago, I was one of the founders of the Colorado I Have a Dream Foundation, an organization that goes into some of Denver's toughest neighborhoods, where dropout rates are as high as 90%. And we work with kids for a decade with the promise of a college scholarship. And that organization turns 90% dropout rates into 90% graduation rates. I went on to chair a Mile High United Way campaign and board, to chair as its volunteer president the Denver Public Schools Foundation for its first year, the founder of the Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, and most recently, the founder of CareerWise Colorado, a statewide youth apprenticeship system that will serve 20,000 young people a year within the next decade. We have real challenges in Colorado. Over 50% of our school districts in this state operate only 4 days a week, the majority for financial reasons. As your next governor, it's not enough just to say that education is your first priority. I will work to bring the resources, the investment that we need to pay our teachers professional wages and to move this state forward, as well as creating over 20,000 apprenticeships per year within a decade. Renewable energy is something that we have to move towards 100%. But during the 8 years that I'll be governor, we'll move from the 21.8% that we have today to over 45% on our way to 100% renewable. And with healthcare, as Washington is unraveling the ACA, I will work with other Western state governors to bring affordable, universal health care to everyone in this state and in this country. We can work together. As your next governor, I will lead, as I always have, to make a difference for each of you. Thank you.
All right. For this next question, we're going to ask you to keep it to a 1-minute response, and I'm going to go ahead and keep it with you, Mr. Ginsberg. Given the tragedy in Parkland and other mass shootings, do you believe that there should be new restrictions on access to firearms in this country and in the state of Colorado, or is that a right that we should still be protecting?
Certainly we should protect the Second Amendment, but what we have in this country is not protecting all of us. I do support the laws that have been passed in Colorado to limit magazine capacity, to close all the loopholes so that you can't get a gun. I think we should raise the age to 21 to get both a long gun and a revolver. We should also ensure that if you get a license in this state, you should have the training to ensure that you know how to protect that gun, make sure it's in a gun safe or a gun lock, and if your gun is used in commission of a crime because you didn't secure it, I believe you should be charged with a felony. We need to listen to the kids in Florida. They are speaking truth to power. Listen to them. Because this country is not designed just to serve a few interest groups that are willing to pay politicians millions of dollars to vote their way. As Coloradans, we should do what's right. Let's listen to those young people because they are our future, and it's the future that we, frankly, have not been upholding for them. Thank you.
And Ms. Kennedy, same question.
Do you want to go this way or that way?
That way. Let's start with you, Ms. Kennedy.
We are so proud of the 2,500 students in this school district who walked out and marched in protest of the horrific violence that they saw in Florida, in recognition that it is our kids, it is our students who are the targets and victims of these mass shootings all across this country. And it is time that we ban military-style assault weapons in the United States. I also support the great work the Democrats have done here in Colorado in mandating universal background checks. Every gun sold in this state is subject to a background check, and 1,200 people have been denied the ability to purchase a firearm because they have a violent criminal record, because they have a restraining order against them, because they have a history of domestic abuse. These laws are keeping us safer. I also believe Colorado should have a red flag law, where if someone you know and love is a risk to themselves or somebody else, that we are able to take their gun away.
And Mr. Lopez?
You know, the tragedy that happened, I don't know that any of us can really wrap our minds around it. I think we can all agree that there's a huge mental health problem in our country. How it started, I don't know. How we're going to address it, it's going to be a challenge for us because it's complex. I do support the Second Amendment, and I don't know that anything that we can do would stop someone from actually doing what they chose to do that one afternoon. But we need to make sure that we work on protecting our children. That is the number one concept that we need to look at, because they are the most precious things in our lives. They are the ones that we need to let them know that as parents and as adults, we want to make sure that they can go to school without any fears. Our world has changed dramatically. How we are going to get there, I think it's us coming together and talking and making sure that we move forward. But let me be clear. We must always put our children first, because their education and their hope for the future is what we need to protect.
And Mr. Helker?
Obviously, as a libertarian, I'm not going to be pushing for a lot of gun control laws. I think there are reasonable ones out there that can be enforced. What concerns me most with the shooting down in Florida was the fact that there was a government failure upon government failure upon government failure to stop this gentleman before he got to the school. When I talk about excellence in government, I think we have to start there. Point two, the most amazing thing about this is we didn't used to have school shootings. And the question we have to ask now is why? And what do we do with that population to make sure they're no longer part of the problem? Thank you.
And Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I think we have to stop linking mental health and guns together. There certainly are people who are mentally ill who have guns and commit murders and other things, but that's an excuse. We have a gun issue in this country, and the work that the legislature did and the governor did to sign laws that protect people, including universal background checks, including limiting magazines, are critical laws that I would continue to support. I think we also have to have a conversation around bump stocks. This is an easy one, I think, for Democrats, but for hopefully everybody. And when Senator Mike Merrifield of our state legislature stood up right after Las Vegas, he asked me to join him in that fight against bump stocks. I think we have to go further. We have to urge Congress. We have to urge our Colorado congressmen and women to take action on behalf of the entire country, not just the state. And last, I want to see that we talk about domestic violence, because that is in fact where most murders and incidents of shooting occur, and we need to protect people who are vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. So the first question when we went out to look for the community, obviously guns was a very salient topic. The next one that came up was about school funding in Tabor. And the question that we've constructed here is, we're constitutionally underfunding our public schools with Amendment 23, et cetera, and yet we're constantly running into Tabor caps. How would you balance these constitutional mandates as governor? And let's start with Lieutenant Governor Lynn.
Well, thank you. We have what we call the fiscal thicket in Colorado. You may have heard of this before. We have Tabor, we have Amendment 23, we have other things that work in a complex way. We need to talk about modifying Tabor. I do not believe we can repeal Tabor. I think I'd love to repeal Tabor, but most people wouldn't. So we have to think about how we make it more responsible to the growing needs of this state. We did that in the last legislative session, in which we made sure that we ensured funding to rural hospitals, put some money in transportation. We are funding our public schools about $800 million below the Amendment 23 cap. For the last couple of years, the governor's proposed how we increase some of that funding. It's not enough. We've got to go farther. We've got to call the question. We all need to fund public education, pre-K, kindergarten, and K through 12, so that we can turn out some of the best students and best future residents and citizens of this state.
Mr. Ginsburg.
Certainly Tabor is an issue, and it's something that many politicians always say, well, we're in this thicket because of Tabor. But it doesn't prevent your leaders to make the commitment to you to make the case for making an investment in education. It doesn't stop us from doing that. So as your next governor, yes, I agree with Donna, we should modify Tabor, take out the formulas within it, keeping the right to vote on new taxes. But it's not the only problem. Gallagher is as well. And I sat down with the author of the Gallagher Amendment and asked him first why he did it. It was to protect people from fixed incomes from being priced out of their homes. But it's gone so much farther than that. And I asked him, would you be willing to modernize Gallagher? And his answer was, no one's ever asked, and yes. Leadership is about tackling tough problems, listening to people as to why they do it, and finding common ground. As your next governor, I will fight to reform both Tabor and Gallagher, because they are both issues that are holding our state back. Thank you.
Ms. Kennedy.
It's shameful what Tabor has done to the public education system here in our state. Nobody in Colorado wants us to rank at the bottom among states in the support that we provide for our schools. Half of the school districts in the state of Colorado today have cut back to a 4-day school week because of funding cuts, half of them. I was the author of Amendment 23. It is the only measure that has passed statewide in Colorado in 30 years that increased funding for public education and avoided deeper cuts that were being required by our Tabor Amendment. I also helped craft Referendum C, the last balanced budget agreement. Those are the only two measures that have passed statewide that have taken on Tabor. I helped develop and build the coalitions to pass them. As your governor, I will lead the bipartisan coalition to pass permanent Tabor reform in Colorado so we can adequately and equitably fund our education system.
Mr. Lopez.
You know, both Tabor and Amendment 23 are constitutional amendments, and yet we have elected officials that feel that they can do whatever they want. You know, when Tabor says you're supposed to give money back to the citizens, they choose not to. They choose to do something different. When Amendment 23 says you need to fund schools at a certain level, they decide, let's create the negative factor. Let's create the negative factor so that we don't have to do that. You know, you need someone that has true leadership that'll stand tall. What's wrong in asking you where we should spend the money? What's wrong in asking you if we should do something totally different? And it's not about amending Tabor, because once you amend Tabor, you're going to change it forever. Tabor got passed because the people don't trust the elected officials in managing the money correctly. But that doesn't prevent us from asking one question so that we can move forward. And I think as governor, that's what you should do. is ask that one question and make your case. But let's not change it forever, because we know government doesn't do things correctly.
And Mr. Helker.
To begin with, I don't think anyone's got 51% of the vote to change Tabor. Not at this point in time, anyway. Having said that, I find that people will vote to increase taxes so long as they think their money is going to be spent appropriately. And the biggest problem is actually having people responsible enough to put forward proposals that the people understand and will work, and they trust them. And right now, I don't think there's a large enough trust level. I think as a governor, I would work really hard to get the trust level up, so when I asked the people for more money, it'd be given.
So we're going to start this one with you, Lieutenant Governor. Or, excuse me, no, it is with you, Mr. Helker. Hey. So, Mr. Helker, yeah, Colorado, like many other states, is witnessing the effects of the opioid epidemic, and historically, the state has had a higher than average suicide rate. What role do you see the state playing in addressing those issues?
It's amazing. This epidemic came about when they changed the regulations. Suddenly, opiates were no longer addictive. We could give them to a wider group of people, and there'd be no consequences. We either have to change it back to the way it was originally, where very few people got opiates. That's the quickest way to get rid of this. And as a state, it may be that we go up and say, you have to our doctors and say, no, you can't prescribe this, except in very limited circumstances. I think that's the best way. Depending on other programs, I don't think it's going to work. I think we have to step back to where we were and go forward from there.
And now you, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, I've spent almost my whole life in healthcare, running large healthcare organizations, including Kaiser Permanente in 5 states. And so healthcare is really something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And we have to think about how we integrate what we know exists. About 1 out of every 4 people in Colorado have some kind of mental illness, and we have to recognize that. We have to destigmatize that. We have to encourage them to get help. On the substance abuse side, things like opioids, we were able last year, while I tried in partnership with our Republican and Democratic legislators, we did through the Medicaid program, and now it's going through the legislature, limit the supply of opioids. That's the first step. We cannot have 30 days unlimited supply to people who have pain. There's lots of other ways to deal with pain. And as governor, I will continue to work to improve transparency, affordability of health care, as well as treatment in substance abuse areas.
Mr. Ginsburg.
Early on in my campaign, almost a year ago, I was in La Junta, Colorado, where one of the members of their school board said that 50% of her friends were addicted to opioids. 50%. That's a cancer in our state and in this country. And yes, limiting prescription limits, that's essential. But we also have to recognize that when people are addicted and they end up in our criminal justice system, they need to end up in treatment, not in jail. These are issues that if we don't have a healthcare system that enables someone to get immediate treatment, and then as they transition out of that treatment to be able to continue to take the drugs that will keep them off of opioids, there are actually limits and obstacles to do that in our state, and as a result, a friend of mine's daughter, she went through that treatment program. She had to go cold turkey off the medications they were using, and she overdosed 3 months later of a heroin overdose. We have to have smart regulations that meet the needs of our people in our community. Thank you.
Ms. Kennedy.
So first off, I think we need to acknowledge and recognize the culpability of the pharmaceutical industry in pushing these drugs in our communities across the state. Yes, we need to limit the supply, but the challenge we have now is an awful lot of people in our state innocently became addicted to opioids, and they need access to treatment services. We have counties here in Colorado where people have to drive 100 miles to be able to get the help and the care that they need. And Noel's right, a lot of these folks end up cycling through our criminal justice system because they aren't able to access the treatment that they need. So some folks do pretty well with medically assisted treatment, but they need ongoing support, and we have to make the investment as a state, whether it's private insurers or public plans, that people are able to get the addiction and treatment recovery services that they need so we can help our kids get off these drugs.
And Mr. Lopez.
We all know that, our society has changed dramatically. And you have to look at why are people self-medicating themselves? And why are doctors so eager to prescribe a pill instead of actually doing health care? We need to get back to a time where a doctor really spent time with you and talked to you about your conditions and talked to you about your symptoms. Not just, here's a pill, go home, you'll feel better, and in 30 days, if you need more, just refill it. We talk about healthcare, but really, when you listen to what people are saying up here, they're talking about how we're going to pay for the services. Let's really talk about providing good quality healthcare to patients so they understand that these drugs are dangerous. Just because a doctor prescribed it to you doesn't mean that you need to use it the way he wants you to use it. You need to monitor it. We need to educate people. We need to make sure that they understand that the health industry is it's a profit organization. And they will sell whatever they can to make sure that they continuously get you to use that same drug.
Thank you. Our last question from the community is about growth, economic growth, and transportation and infrastructure. And we phrase it such. Colorado is an increasingly popular place to move, but this growth has led to strains on our decaying resources and infrastructure. Most of you drove up I-25 for this event and saw it firsthand, in fact. As governor, how do you plan to address this? And we'll start with Mr. Lopez.
What we're seeing today is poor leadership. Governor Bill Ritter in 2008 had a little study done called the Silent Crisis. It was about transportation. That report came back and it said we need to spend more money on transportation. We haven't done anything in the last 10 years. What you're seeing here is growth with no one really focusing in on how we're going to have these transportation corridors move forward. Yeah, let's widen the lane. Let's put more people on the same road. Let's just make sure that we don't look at creating alternative corridors. Really looking at what is the growth doing to internal infrastructure, schools, transportation, our medical facilities. As mayor, I experienced 160% growth in 4 years. I can tell you that if we don't get on top of this, we will continue to see these types of pressures, and we're going to become the ugly twin sister of California.
Mr. Helker.
Well, that's a scary thought, the ugly twin sister of California. One of the libertarian things is they'd like to privatize more of this. And if elected governor, I would look into privatizing some of this so we take the load off of the taxpayer. But where we do need roads, first, we pay fees every year to improve the roads. Unfortunately, they're not really fees, they're taxes. They go into the general fund. We need to take those fees out, away from the general fund, increase them if we have to pay for the roads. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor Lynn.
Well, I've been working with a lot of folks, both legislative and executive branch, on transportation, water, and broadband. 3 key issues around our infrastructure, and I know you've done some great work up in Fort Collins on broadband, but we've got to have broadband for our entire state because that's the way people work now. They need it for health care, they need it in their schools, and we have an inequitable distribution of broadband access. We have a bill we're working on now in the legislature that I think will get that done. On transportation, we put $1.9 billion into the transportation system, as I mentioned before, through something called the hospital provider fee bill. It's a down payment, it's not sufficient. We're going to have to call the question in this coming November. And water, we can't not talk about water. It's critical to all of us, agriculture, consumers, and certainly, yes, when we talk about growth. I do not support limits on growth. I support a balanced, thoughtful plan on growth, but we can't just arbitrarily say we're not going to grow anymore. 9 years ago, we were crying about our economy. We're happy now. We've got to work on these things that support our entire economy and everybody in this state.
Mr. Ginsburg.
Before we move forward with plans of what we should do in one area, we should look at all of these areas. We can't look at our challenges of infrastructure, water, affordable housing, without integrating them into an overall plan. The governor did an outstanding job with the Colorado Water Plan. He reached out to all of our communities and all of the basins, and they came up with an integrated plan, but it just dealt with one issue. We have to make investments in our roads. We need to bring high-speed internet to communities throughout our state so that economic development just doesn't happen on the Front Range. We need to ensure that we have a transportation network that allows people to live where it's affordable and work where the jobs are. That might look like light rail or passenger rail from Fort Collins all the way down to Trinidad. We must build a 50-year vision for this state together, not just developed under the Gold Dome, but with all of us throughout our state, integrate those ideas together, build the financing plan to make that happen, and build a better Colorado. Thank you.
And Ms. Kennedy.
So I've watched Colorado's population double in my lifetime growing up here. I've watched our open space get chewed up by development. I've sat maddeningly in traffic trying to get home to make dinner for my kids. The forecasters are telling us that another 4 to 5 million people are forecasted to move into our state. Our state's population is going to double again by about the time my teenagers are my age. Now, we can't stop this growth, but we need to do a much better job preparing and investing for this growth so that we keep Colorado the place that we love. We have to make the investments in transportation and transit. It's high time to have high-speed passenger rail from Fort Collins to Pueblo so we can get out of our cars. We need to invest in affordable housing so people can afford to live in the communities they grew up in the communities that they work. We need to protect our air quality. Colorado should have the cleanest air in the country, and we can't continue to take water out of our western slope to supply a growing Front Range population. We have to innovate in the future.
Okay, very good. We have 2 more 1-minute blocks, just to let you all know what's coming. The first 1-minute block will be a question that I'll give you in just a second. Then we'll give you another 1-minute block for your closing remarks, okay? And this first question that is a flexible question for you. What is one challenge that we have not discussed today that you care about and see a solution to, and how are you uniquely positioned to address it? Start with you, Ms. Kennedy.
I guess one of the challenges we haven't talked about is affordability. Colorado is just getting a lot more expensive for families that are living here. We know all too well about the stagnation of wages, and we've seen escalating, rising expenses that families just can't afford. It's in housing. We face housing affordability challenges throughout our state. It's in healthcare. I hear too often from families that are spending $2,000 or even $3,000 a month on their family's health care. It's the rising cost of college. As we've defunded public education, we've also defunded our public colleges and universities. I know this as a mom looking to send my daughter to college next year and facing a $120,000 tuition bill for a 4-year undergraduate degree for in-state students. We've priced these out of reach for far too many families in our state. You'll see me focus on affordability.
Thank you. Mr. Ginsburg.
There are so many issues that we didn't touch on. I will start with healthcare. Certainly, the ACA is being dismantled. It almost doesn't exist anymore. Yet people in this country, over 15 million, will lose their health care. So what do we do? When I founded CareerWise Colorado, a statewide youth apprenticeship system, it's become a national model, and one of the candidates for governor in California reached out to me, the leading candidate, and asked if he could use that as a platform within his state. So I reached back out to him over a month ago and said, Washington's not going to do their job. We need a universal single-payer healthcare system in our states. Would you be open to creating an interstate compact with other Western states to actually build that system with a large enough market where we can bring transparency and control costs, and finally do what Washington will not do, bring health care to everyone in our state and set an example for the country? His answer, let's move forward with those ideas. Those are the right kind of ideas to move our state and our country forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor Lynn.
Well, I think we have lost our ability to have the American dream or the Colorado dream. I am uniquely positioned to be your governor and to fight for that issue because I was there myself. My father in the 70s said, not that important for you to go to college. You want to go, figure it out yourself. We didn't have the income. I worked my way as a waitress to get through school. I've been a single mother for 26 years of 3 kids. I worked really hard. I went back to school when I was 42 to get a degree, paid for it myself because I thought it was important. So hard work should equal advancement, right? And I was lucky, and I worked hard. But too many people in Colorado today don't have those opportunities. Yes, wages are flat, and everything behind it is going up at a higher rate than wages are. And we've got to fight for that. We've got to make sure that people can afford to live where they want to live, they can afford health care, and yes, if they want to send their kids to college, they can do that where tuition is affordable in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Helker.
The good thing about being a libertarian is you get to be a little crazy sometimes. Now, what I'm going to suggest to you is that I can increase the water flow from the rivers by 1/3 to 2/3. And it won't cost you that much money. How can I do this miracle? There's this little creature called a beaver. It makes dams. I happen to know this works because where I lived, where I was raised as a kid, there was a beaver dam above it. So long as the beaver dam was there, we had enough water. We can go to Park County, put beaver ponds completely around it. You should get a 1/3 increase in about 20 years. A little crazy, but let's give it a try.
Oh, Mr. Lopez.
You know, the one thing that I'll tell you that's most important to me is this urban and rural divide. There are 64 counties. It's about all of us, not just some of us. When you travel out throughout the state, you'll hear the rural communities tell you the urban corridor doesn't care about us. They don't care about our quality of life. They don't care about whether our children are going to be able to have and achieve the American dream. They don't care. Yet we don't talk about how we're going to bring rural and urban divide and do away with it. I live in Elbert County. I live in rural Colorado. I have a well, I have a septic tank, I have a dirt road, and I love all of it. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we stay together as one state, that we make sure that we're creating economic vitality to those communities that are struggling, because if we don't, they're going to dry up. That agricultural land, those ranchers, they're going to go away. And that's not what we want in Colorado. We want to make sure that everybody can achieve the American dream.
All right, and now for closing remarks, we'll go ahead and start with you, Mr. Ginsburg, and then come back down the line.
Our next governor will help chart the course for the next 8 years in this state. And we have real challenges despite one of the best economies in the country. And what we need is both innovators and action-oriented people. And throughout my career in this state, in the nonprofits that I've led, the businesses and manufacturing that I've created, I have that form of leadership. But at the same time, I spent 10 years working with our dreamers that we sponsored through I Have a Dream, turning a 90% dropout rate into a 92% graduation rate. What we did for those kids is cared for them, Leslie and I, Leslie in the audience, as if they were our own. And what you will see with me as governor is I will care about you, your family, your future, your job, and bring to this state the innovation that we need to tackle our biggest challenges. That is the future of our state. We need to look back 50 years from now and say our leaders were paying attention. They were doing their job. My name is Noel Ginsberg. I'm running for governor of the state of Colorado. Please go to noelforcolorado.com and caucus for me. Thank you.
And Lieutenant Governor?
Well, thank you. It's been my honor to serve as your Lieutenant Governor and Chief Operating Officer. I will continue to do that for the remaining time ahead of us until January 8th. But I'd like that promotion. I really want your support to be the Democratic nominee for governor, and hopefully your support as we go forward. You know, it's no question Colorado is a diverse, and we call it a purple state. And I think someone who has the credentials, my first job as a volunteer was canvassing for George McGovern in 1972 in the streets of New Hampshire. But I've also worked for Republicans, and I've also been part of the business community. And I understand when you have a conversation about increasing taxes, we've got to think about the impact on businesses, but we've got to convince them that it's important for our future. I'm Donna Lynn. I am going to fight for you in the key areas that we all care about: healthcare, healthcare transparency, government responsibility and transparency. That's what you're going to get from me. You're going to hear a lot of slogans in this campaign. People will promise you anything for your vote. A proven leader. I don't promise things that I can't deliver. I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell you how much it costs. I'll tell you when I'm going to get you there. Please vote for me. Thank you.
And Mr. Helker?
Scott Helker, Libertarian. On the off chance there's actually a couple of Libertarians in this audience, come to the state convention the end of March and vote for me. On the off chance I do get the nomination and I do get to run for governor, look at the Libertarian platform. See if it makes sense to you. See if limited government makes sense to you. It's amazing. When I first joined the Libertarian movement, most of us were coming from the Republican Party. Now, most of us are coming from the Democratic Party. Look at it and then decide. Thank you.
And Mr. Lopez?
You know, I come from humble beginnings. My mom and dad were migrant workers. My dad had a 6th grade education and he never learned how to read and write. My mom has an 8th grade education. But the one thing she taught us boys is that, you know, you need to work hard, you need to provide for your family, you need to be honest, and you need to help others. If you do that, you will live a good life. And always pray to the Lord above because he will give you guidance. You know, we need to come together as it pertains to an understanding that we need a problem solver, not a problem observer. And I know what a public servant is. I'm asking to be hired as the CEO. You are the boss, not people underneath the dome. The people of Colorado are the ones that we should be listening to. You are the ones that we should touch and make sure that we keep our hand on the pulse of what's going on in your community, in your lives. And that's what you'll get from Greg Lopez as a governor for Colorado. Thank you.
And Ms. Kennedy?
Well, thank you, Fort Collins, for hosting us here today. Really appreciate all of your activism and involvement in our democracy. Colorado is an innovative and forward-looking state, and I am running for governor to continue the great progress that we're experiencing here in our state and to make sure that everyone in our state benefits from our progress and that we protect this beautiful state and keep Colorado the place we love. I believe we can do that if we make public education our state's #1 priority. If we ensure health care is accessible and affordable to everyone in our state by offering a public health insurance option. And if we work together to do a better job to manage and prepare for the growth that we know is coming by protecting our open space and our public lands, keeping Colorado's air the cleanest in the country, our water the cleanest in the country, and standing up to Washington. Leadership in the years ahead is going to come from the states, and you'll see me lead right here from Colorado. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank all of you again for coming out and participating in this forum. Let's give them a round of applause, everybody. And as we get everything set up for the next round, it'll be about a 5-minute intermission or so. And I'm sure all these folks have literature and whatnot out front so you can learn more about them. And thank all of you again for coming out for all of this.
Would the candidates please join us on stage, please? Candidates for the second session, please join us on stage. We're going to get going in 3 minutes. Thank you. Ian. John French and Michael Schroeder. If you are here, please come to the stage. John French and Michael Schroeder. Thank you. We're going to get going in 1 minute, so if you could please be seated, we are going to get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, okay, welcome back. We're going to begin with our second group of candidates. I will start out and just remind you of the format that we're using today. Candidates are going to be asked a series of a few questions. We'll give them 1 or 2 minutes and we'll direct them accordingly. We'll assign the order. We'll prompt you when it is your turn. And again, this is a reminder to the audience and to the candidates, since this is a bipartisan and multi-partisan forum and not a debate, please refrain from back and forth between the candidates. And also, we ask that you be respectful and have fun and gain all the information that you can. Okay? Great. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you again to the candidates for joining us as well. So let's begin with our opening remarks, and we'll give you 2 minutes for that, starting with you, Mr. Underwood. Why should you be the next governor of Colorado?
Good afternoon. What? I'm running for governor. Good afternoon. There we go. My name is Eric Underwood, and I'm running for governor of Colorado. Let me tell you a little bit about my background, because my background would really inform you of how I came to my platform. For number one, I grew up in a single-parent household. My mom had 6 children, 2 sets of twins, and I'm a twin myself. And guess what my twin sister name is? Erica. That's right. I know what it's like to struggle and have to make do with what you have. And the state is doing very well, with our economy on the Front Range, but people beyond the Front Range mountains aren't really feeling it. My campaign theme is outward inward, from rural Colorado to urban Colorado and everyone in between. I went off to work for a United States Senator in Washington, D.C., George Voinovich from Ohio. He was a 2-term governor and a 2-term United States Senator. He was a mentor to me. And he was also a moderate Republican. I know how to work across, the aisle. That's what's missing. I also know what it's like to be a business owner. I started a digital technology company, My24, and we did a $100 million deal with AT&T and brought it to this state. So I went from a housing project, 3 of them, with a single parent, to working in Washington, D.C., knowing how the sausage is made, and also as a business owner. So I understand what it's like, and I look forward to lively discussion. I'm not a soundbite candidate. I have a plan and vision for this state. It's about time that we have plans, because soundbites is what got us what's in the White House today. Thanks.
And I'll just remind the candidates, I forgot to say this in my intro, that we have cards down here for you. 30 seconds is yellow, red is you're done.
They're very well coordinated, too. It's impressive performance down here.
Mr. Johnston.
That was good. That was good. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Johnston. I'm a candidate for governor. So grateful for you all being here. I grew up on the western slope of Colorado. My mom was a music teacher. My dad was a bartender. I sometimes wonder how that happened when my mom walked into the bar and saw the guy with the handlebar mustache and the purple chopper and the fishnet t-shirt and said, "That is the father of my children." But fortunately for me, she did. And so my parents opened a bed and breakfast on the western slope when I grew up running that family business, which meant I spent most of my childhood after school doing things like cleaning a lot of toilets, folding a lot of laundry, mowing a lot of lawns, making a lot of breakfast, which my wife would say are the best skills I brought into the marriage. So it's probably the best benefit. But I eventually followed my mom into the real family business in my family, which is teaching. I'm a fourth-generation public school teacher. Started my career as a high school English teacher and then as a school principal in Colorado, where I ran schools in 3 different counties, in Arapahoe and Denver and then in Adams. And Adams County led a high school where we had about a 50% dropout rate when we took over, and over 3 years turned it into what became the first public high school in Colorado, where 100% of our kids all graduated from high school, and 100% of those kids were all admitted to 4-year colleges. And along the way, a little U.S. Senator named Barack Obama came to visit my school, and I spent a couple years advising him when he ran for president. And then I ran for the state Senate and spent the last 7 years as a state senator. And I think the most important thing about my service in the state Senate that I'm proud of is over those years, I sponsored more than 120 pieces of legislation, and 120 pieces of legislation that got signed into law by the governor. And of those, more than 100 of those all have Republican co-sponsors. Because my belief is if you want to govern in this state and get big things done, you got to be able to build coalitions broader than just one party. I think I've done that as a teacher, I've done that as a school principal, I've done that as a state senator. And I think this is a moment where we're going to be called on to show that Colorado is the place where good people can still come together and solve big problems. That's been my experience, that's my belief in who Colorado is, and that's the kind of state I'd like to lead. Thanks for having me.
Representative Polis. I think it's on. Yeah, I think.
Well, it's great, of course, to be here in the district I'm honored to represent in northern Colorado, and I've interacted with many of you in that capacity, and many of you have been in town halls in this very chamber, and you know that my style is to listen first, and I'm always honored to do that, and hopefully if you've called my office, we've been responsive, and if not, I know you'll let me know personally. I'm a Colorado native. I started my first business in college. It was an internet access provider. We started with 2 friends I met through college. I started a internet flower company, proflowers.com. Also, my mother is a poet, my father's an artist, and I helped take the small family publishing company online, electronic greeting cards. So I've had several economic success stories. I co-founded an accelerator for other startups called Techstars, which helps other people who have ideas transform those into reality. And my whole life has really been about turning bold ideas into reality. So when I saw the need, for instance, for English language learners in the Denver metro area and that some of the schools weren't working for them, I said, let's start schools specifically to help new immigrants learn English. And I started New America School, which has campuses in Aurora and Thornton and Lakewood, 16 to 21-year-old English language learners. I co-founded a school for homeless youth and youth in transitional housing in Denver. And then in 2008, I ran for Congress, and it was the honor of my life to serve alongside Barack Obama and to have been part of the legislative achievements of the last 8 years, and now, of course, representing northern Colorado in the age of Trump, which is one of the reasons I'm running for governor, because I feel to make progress, we need to roll up our sleeves and do it right here in Colorado. And with Trump pulling out of the Paris Accords and moving the wrong way and trying to artificially prop up coal, we need a bold renewable energy agenda here, and I have a plan to transition our state to 100% renewable energy by 2040. I have a plan to make sure every child in the state has access to preschool and kindergarten. I'm the father of a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I can afford preschool and kindergarten for them. Many of you can as well. It's simply not fair that other families in our state don't have that same opportunity, and that's why I'm running for governor.
And Mr. Barlock. Should be hot. It should.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Steve Barlock, and I want to be your next governor of Colorado. I'm a 5th-generation Coloradan, and what does that mean? It means on either side of the aisle, I represent the grassroots of Colorado. We've been Republicans, Democrats, and everything in between. I love Colorado so much, I looked at our situation with everyone moving here, doubling our population is true. Ms. Kennedy said it best. So many people have moved here, we've lost that sense of community. The government tries to tell us what a community is, and we look at it and go, no, we grow into our own community. And wanting a good, solid opportunity for everyone in Colorado to succeed, I decided, let's find out the 2 top issues that affect all of us. And right now, it is our PARA system, our Public Employee Retirement Association, and it is water. For 170 years, water has always been the #1 issue in Colorado. It's our ranchers, our farmers, our industry, our ski slopes, and of course, the people who use it. We have to fight this interstate compacts left and right to make sure we have more water. We have to tell California there's a new technology that's been around for 70 years, and it's called desalination. It's time they start drinking from the ocean and stop using our water to fill up their swimming pools. We're going to battle for our water, and every farmer, rancher, person in the state will have it. And we can use the original green energy with it. Hydroelectric. It's not just dams. It's not beaver dams, my friend. It's not just dams, but we can put hydro everywhere a water source crosses a power line. We have to be able to use that original green energy, which no one has stated it being a green energy except me. So thank you very much. I look forward. I'll talk about para in a little while.
All right, I think I figured this out now. All right, for this next section, it is going to be, please keep to 1 minute responses. We're going to start with you, Mr. Barlock, pardon me. So we recently saw the tragedy at Parkland and other mass shootings. Given that, do you believe that there should be new restrictions on gun access, or is that a right that we need to be maintaining the protections of?
Well, besides Eric over here, I think I'm the only candidate running that has actually been involved in the school shooting. In 1988 Manual High School, there were students that were gang members shooting each other in the park across the street. And our police officers did not properly respond. And they've learned since that incident, and I'm happy they've learned. But they drew it into a group of students leaving the school at the end of the day. We all ran back in that school, and I wish today that either Miss White, Mr. Hoops, our principal, Linda Bates-Transu, I wish they were armed to protect us because we were in fear for our lives. So I want to see us protected. I want to see the teachers protect their students at all means. Thank you.
And, sorry, Congressman, we're actually going, let's start with Mr. Underwood on this one. Yeah. Keeping you all on your toes.
Sorry, Jarrett. I know what it's like to experience gun violence. I grew up in a McDaniel Glen housing project in Atlanta, Georgia, and got shot at once. And that shook me. Guns should not be in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We should do a better job at background checks. What Colorado doesn't do is check with other states. And New York is now doing a compact with northeastern states, and we need to do that here. We need to know who has these guns. The second thing is, I know, or I have a plan to engage the students. The Parkland shooting, so I have a plan called the Colorado Youth Voting Act, which will lower the voting age from 18 to 16 to engage our youth and make it a high school requirement that they have to at least participate in one election before they graduate. We need to spark civics, and this is the best chance that we have to combat the NRA special interests. So I want to empower our young folks.
And Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. This is a simple question to me. Maybe I'm different than, I've been a gun owner my entire life. And I've never known a fellow gun owner who needed a 100-round magazine to shoot an elk. And I've never known someone who needed a bump stock to defend their own home. There are ways you can solve these problems if you have the courage to solve them. So I came out with the first TV ad of this campaign last week, which was an ad on guns, an ad that we recorded before the Parkland shooting happened. And we came out with a plan we call For No More. What are the 4 things we can do for no more of these type of mass shootings? And here's what they are. One is, yes, you have to get military-style weapons off the streets of Colorado. Second is, you have to require universal background checks for any gun sale, anytime, anywhere. The third is you have to put in place gun violence restraining orders, which make sure folks that have shown themselves to be a danger to themselves or others don't get access to firearms and can't keep firearms if they have them. And fourth, you have to ban bump stocks. Those things are all possible. They fit with the Second Amendment, and they're the common sense steps we ought to take. I fought the NRA twice in the state Senate, and I won twice. I will do it again as governor because this is a common sense solution if we have the courage to do it.
And Congressman.
This is a simple case where the public interest in safety needs to win out over special interest politics. And you know I'm never afraid to take on special interests, whether it's taking on the gun manufacturing lobby, whether it's taking on the pharmaceutical industry to allow reimportation of prescription drugs, whether it's taking on the health insurance industry to advocate for Medicare for all. There's no difference here. We need common sense measures that, of course, are consistent with the Second Amendment that protect our safety, like getting military-style weapons off of our streets, making sure that people who have temporary restraining orders no longer have access to their guns. And we need to allow the Center for Disease Control as well as state research into gun violence and the underlying causes. We all wish that there was an easy answer, but saying that there's not an easy answer is not an excuse to not take action. We need a governor who has the courage and the track record of making progress on this issue. I'm proud to have had an F with the NRA my entire time in Congress.
Thank you. Our next topic is school funding in Tabor, and we'll start with you, Representative Polis. We're constitutionally underfunding our public schools, save for Amendment 23, and yet we're constantly running into Tabor caps. How would you balance these constitutional mandates as governor?
So my priority for education is to offer every child in the state universal free full-day preschool and kindergarten. Doesn't mean it's mandatory, it means it's available. Right now the state only funds half a day of kindergarten. Families, except for very low-income families, have to pay for a full day of kindergarten, have to pay for preschool outside of a few slots, again, for low income, but the middle class doesn't get it, and frankly it's an affordability issue as well as an education issue. There have been numerous studies that show that it actually saves money to invest in quality early childhood education. Lower special education rates, lower grade repetition rates, lower youth adjudication rates. So not only is this good for the kids, does it make life more affordable for families struggling with rent or mortgage, but it absolutely saves money over the next several years for that child and for our public schools.
Mr. Barlock.
I am a strong advocate for homeschooling. I think it takes the burden off of society, and for those who can do it, thank you. We must give more choice in our education system. When I went to Manual High School, I had an opportunity to take classes at East. For classes that weren't offered at Manual or East, we had sister schools, and we could go in the morning or afternoon. I'd like to see that spread out to one day at one school specializing in something, one day at another school, and maybe even 3 schools. We have this ability, but we don't have the ability in rural Colorado. Now, to protect Tabor is mandatory in this state because we need to protect affordable housing. And if we crush Tabor and Gallagher, we will no longer have the opportunity to have affordable housing. We will be taxed out of our own homes. Thank you.
Mr. Underwood.
I am proud to be the only candidate that wants to repeal Tabor. We have to repeal Tabor, and we have to repeal it now, because how are we going to pay for our schools, roads, and bridges? I used to be a Republican, but I'm a proud Democrat, and in fact, I was pretty much of a moderate liberal kind of Republican. But here's the thing. We have to take on this tough challenge. Republicans like to think that the money's going to fall out of the sky to pay for our teachers. There's a 3,000 teacher vacancy here in this state, and a lot of it is in rural Colorado. So we have to get rid of Tabor. I have a plan to work with the state legislature and put it on an off-year ballot, statewide ballot, in the fall of 2019 if I'm elected governor. It is that important for this state. I mean, you know, scare tactics and all, the reality of the situation is, how are we going to move the state forward? And that's just the bottom line. You got to think about it. Where is the money going to come from?
Mr. Johnston.
Thank you. As a former teacher and a former school principal, this is an obvious question for me. I always say, if you're happy with 35 kids in a kindergarten class, and you're happy with a 3.5-hour drive from Fort Collins to Denver, and you're happy with 10% a year tuition increases at CSU, you're probably fine with Tabor. Leave it in place. If you want a different level of state services than that, then you have to make some changes. And so I've committed in the first term, we would build a coalition to go to the ballot and repeal the worst parts of Tabor to finally allow us to restore funding, not just to schools, but to roads and bridges and infrastructure we'll need to solve the rest of the problems we're talking about today. You can do that by leaving in place the voters' ability to vote on tax increases, which I don't think we will change, but by changing the forced refund mechanism. So what you can do is go to our conservative allies and say, we can take out Tabor without increasing taxes or changing tax rates, but allowing the state budget to recover as the state economy recovers, which means now business leaders and educators and parents are all in the same boat, trying to support economic growth and educational quality at the same time.
All right, and for this next one, we're going to stick with you, Mr. Johnston, to start with. Colorado, like many other states, has been feeling the effects of the opioid epidemic. And on top of that, historically, the state has had a higher than average suicide rate. If elected governor, what role do you see the state playing in addressing these issues?
Drug addiction and suicide in 60 seconds. Here we go. Like many folks, when you grow up on other parts of the state, rural parts of the state, this hits my family. I have a cousin who is addicted to opioids right now and is fighting it. So I think there are 3 big steps we have to make on here. One is we have to get more providers out to parts of the state where there are rural communities that don't have access to providers. We have to expand, instead of focusing on criminalizing drug addiction, we have to focus on treating drug addiction, which means I've proposed in criminal justice expanding drug courts that will allow people to get sentenced to drug treatment and not to prison. And the third is we have to expand what's called medication-assisted treatment, which is the process by which folks can get treatment for opioids without either going cold turkey and turning to heroin or without staying on them for long periods of time. On suicide, I think I talked to folks at Grand Junction High School last week. They lost not just 1 student at Grand Junction High School last year, but 4. And one of the reasons why is they talk about when you are in crisis, if you want to talk to someone, there is 1 high school counselor for every 600 kids. If you want to talk about what the costs of funding public schools are, I would rather you ask, what are the costs of not funding public schools adequately?
And Congressman.
I would encourage you, and this is hard to do justice to in 1 minute, I recently wrote on the opioid epidemic and how we can improve our health care in the Aspen Times. It's posted on my website at polisforcolorado.com. You can see our opioid plan. But one thing I want to point out is the role of the pharmaceutical industry in pushing the opioid epidemic. And I'm glad to see that some counties in Colorado, like Huerfano County, have joined the class action lawsuit against the pharmaceuticals for their complicit role in pushing opioids. 75% of the opioid abuse starts with prescription drugs. It's not that opioids don't have a legitimate role in pain management, but there are alternatives. I also see the hand of the pharmaceutical industry influencing the FDA to try to restrict other compounds like medical marijuana and kratom that restrict our freedom and that can also be used for pain management and are less addictive and less harmful than prescription opioids. So I think we should be open to all alternatives. The best way to stop opioid abuse is to stop it before it starts. We also have to be compassionate with families and individuals that are affected by opioid addiction to try to make sure they have access to substance abuse and treatment to help them get their lives back.
All right. Mr. Barlock.
It's an end-all for doctors right now to give an opioid pill. Just get out of my office. Because these doctors are not, these hospitals aren't being paid by the federal government or the state government on time. There are pressures on this. In rural Colorado, hospitals are in deep trouble because they're not getting paid to take care of their staff. And this affects everything down the road. So we have to make sure that Medicaid payments are getting done and Medicare are getting done to the hospitals that need paid instead of them going into debt. Now on suicide. 3 people in my life. One is a young boy, one in my school years, and one in high school and college. They all committed suicide, and the reason they did was financial. We think we live in a good, growing, booming Colorado. We're leaving so many people behind, and debt is the #1 trigger for mental illness right now, and we have to make sure our economy is great for everyone. Thank you.
And Mr. Underwood.
Folks, the opioid addiction is pretty serious, and I just want to say this. Our jails are not treatment facilities, okay? They're not. But what do you do when you have a state that has a $30 billion budget and is not budgeting, adequately for treatment centers, especially in rural Colorado? We have to fix that. And again, this is going to get worse because we're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents when we need to repeal Tabor. $2.5 billion every year going out for refunds. I bet if you tell people, hey, If we're going to build hospitals, Washington County doesn't have a hospital. They have to go to Morgan County to go to a hospital. So we're not taking care of our own people. So it's not surprising to me that we have these issues and situations that are getting out of control when we're not directing our resources where they need to be.
Okay, another 1-minute question. On growth and transportation and infrastructure. We'll stay with you, Mr. Underwood, to start. Colorado is an increasingly popular place to move, but this growth has led to strains on our decaying resources and infrastructure. And most of you drove up I-25 for this event and saw it firsthand. As governor, how do you plan to address this?
I think I'm still vibrating from my car ride up here. And those roads are bumpy up there. Well, for number one, we have to look at transportation. We need to get people out the cars. And we need, I'll give you an example. I live in Boulder County. It's one of the wealthiest counties in Colorado. And they paid into RTD. And RTD told them to go sit down someplace and wait until 2040. And that's not right. If I'm the next governor, I'm going to speed that up to 2020 to start those light rail projects coming out of Boulder. It's not right that you pay your money, your hard-earned money, expecting to get something back, especially when it comes to transportation. I don't like to sit in traffic, and I know you don't like to sit in traffic, which is why I would have said no if I was a governor to Amazon coming to Metro Denver. How are we going to invite someone to our house when we haven't have our house in order yet? So we need to start thinking about how we're going to get people out of their cars, and we need certainly rail up and down 25.
Mr. Johnston.
Thank you so much. Right now, what we know is that the backlog of transportation projects in this state amounts to $20 billion over the next 20 years. That is a problem you are not going to find the solution to in the couch cushions of the state budget. And so what we, just a month or so ago, the University of Colorado put out a study from the Leeds School of Business that says even with the fastest growing economy in the country, right now they are projecting that by 2019, the state economy will start contracting for two reasons. One is we won't have folks with the skills that are needed to enter the jobs that are being created. The second is we won't actually have a transportation system that allows us to move people and goods across the state. So quite literally, it's not just going to be a pain in your neck, it's going to be an actual pain in your wallet as the economy starts to contract if we don't solve this problem. So I think, yes, we have to look at commuter rail along I-25. I think we have to broaden some of the sections of I-25 and I-70 to relieve major crisis right now. I also think we're going to realize we're not going to be able to pave our way out of this problem internally. You can't just keep adding one more lane on I-70 or I-25 every 5 years and hoping that's going to work. It's time to look long-term at solutions that make it possible for us to move people without paving more lanes.
Representative Polis.
I've been very involved in the Northern Colorado corridor, obviously working with the Weld and Larimer County commissioners, the mayors and town councils up and down 25 on the Highway 25 lane expansion. And as a pragmatist, of course, lane expansion is part of what we need to do. But we also need to think bigger and think bolder. My plan calls for Front Range Rail, Pueblo to Fort Collins, to make sure that people have a viable commuting alternative and freedom of mobility to get cars off the road to finally start making a dent in it. By the time you add a new lane, you're often back to where you were with regard to traffic. And we see that with the Front Range growth every day. We need transit plan communities to make sure that people can afford to live closer to where they work. Because guess what? It's not just Fort Collins, it's not just Boulder, it's also Denver, it's Thornton, it's Aurora. It's becoming harder and harder to afford to live near the metro area where the jobs are. We have to reverse that trend and find a way that people can live in the communities that they work in. I was proud to partner with Summit County to do a 40-acre land exchange where they're able to develop 300 units of affordable workforce housing. As governor, and I also looked for similar out-of-the-box ideas to partner for affordable housing with our local communities.
And Mr. Barlock.
Well, for 8 years, all our money in our budget has not been going to roads and bridges. And that's what we're talking about here, cars. We all enjoy our cars. You know, I'd like to see the private sector take that rail or Hyperloop. Let Amazon build a Hyperloop in their name and charge people to ride it. It's not our job to do that. We want our cars. We want those roads. But when we build those roads, I want to make sure it's Colorado companies that build those roads. I don't want to see a foreign Australian company build another Boulder Turnpike and have our hard taxpayers' money leave the state. Whatever we do, whoever comes in, I would like them to put their base here in Colorado. So that money circles in the state and makes everybody have an opportunity to have an enjoyable life. That's how we do that. We need to fix our infrastructure on water. We're going to have hydroelectric wherever it crosses a power line. Those new pipes from the western slope that are going to have to be redone. So let's battle for our water and, of course, our broadband through the state. Thank you.
Okay, just to let the panelists know, we have 2 more 1-minute blocks. And the last one will be a 1-minute block for your closing remarks. The next question, though, and we'll start with you, Mr. Barlock. What is the one challenge that we have not discussed today that you feel that you are particularly positioned to address, and how would you address it as governor?
Our workforce. I went down to the union halls. I think I saw Mr. Johnson there, and Mr. Polis, and Mr. Eric. Sorry. But our workforce is hurting. When Houston happened, Union 111, our electrical union workers, I went, how are your workers doing? Oh, we're losing about 50 a week down to Houston. Now just think we had Florida and California. Our workforce is terrible. So I like to bring up apprenticeships to build up our workforce. But also when we talk about rural Colorado, our farmers, our ranchers, our wind farms, our oil farms, our natural gas, I'd like to see Colorado students, higher education, help pay their debt off and have a requirement to have a semester working on those rural jobs so they actually know what the real world is, have an opportunity, and maybe fall in love with those jobs because we need workers out there. And that's how we're going to fix Colorado, all 64 counties, by finding good quality workers and hopefully paying off student debt. Thank you. Mr. Underwood.
Growing up in a single-parent household, I literally had to run my way through college. I'm a hurdler. I run the hurdles. In high school, state champion, not bragging. But I also got a scholarship to a college as well, and that's what paved my way. But not everybody can get that. I have a free college education program called the Colorado Hope Grant. The Colorado Hope Grant will give graduating high school seniors with a B average to a public university and or a trade school for free. Now, how do we pay for it? I want to pay for it through the state lottery revenues. In 1994, the voters voted to send those the money to the State Parks and Wildlife Department. It's capped at $69 million. What do you think happens to the other $800+ million? It's in a reserve fund. I want to give hardworking families and deserving students a chance. And also, on the back end of that, you're going to give me 25 hours of community service at the State Parks and Wildlife Department, because I don't believe in giving something free. You're going to work to earn it and to keep it.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. The topic that didn't come up that I thought would come up is fracking and oil and gas development. And so I think that bears talking about for at least 60 seconds. I just had dinner with some families in Firestone last week who are down the road from that home that exploded. I think it is clear that we're going to have to take far more aggressive steps to balance public safety with oil and gas development right now in the state. I think there are a couple of key things we can do. Right now we know there are 800 to 1,000 more of the orphan wells like the one in Firestone that are not plugged and not abandoned and have the potential to be leaking gas into our communities. So I think we have to make some rules that say we're not going to drill in places that are environmentally sensitive. We're not going to drill in places that are ecologically unstable, so you create earthquakes like you have in Oklahoma. And we are also not going to drill right next to people's homes or people's schools. And that means making reasonable setbacks to protect public safety and ensure that you don't have one set of rules for developers who are now building on top of old wells and for wells that are trying to come closer and closer to people's houses. I think this is going to require some courage to get this done, and I'm committed to getting it done as governor.
Representative Polis.
Well, just as I've, of course, never been afraid to take on the gun manufacturing lobby or the pharmaceutical industry, I've never been afraid to take on the oil and gas industry around supporting additional setbacks for our health and safety and local control and the specific parameters around that, defining them better. But one that I was surprised we didn't talk about was healthcare. We talked about opioids and suicide, but healthcare more generally, we are the only country that doesn't have some form of universal healthcare. We can do better. As a small businessman, I know how distracting it was to running a small business to have to deal with administering healthcare benefits for our employees. As consumers, we're all confused by the fine print. Insurance creates the most value when we're all in one risk pool. That's why, since I was elected to Congress, I'm supportive of Medicare, single-payer, universal health care. Through the state, we can work with our other western states through an interstate consortium for universal single-payer care. People can still buy and will have freedom to buy supplemental or additional insurance on top of that. Some companies will want to offer that to retain and attract employees. But I know we can do this better, both morally, economically, and more efficiently. And as governor, it'll be one of my top priorities.
All right, and now for closing remarks, and we will go ahead and stick with you, Congressman Polis.
My whole life has been about turning innovative, bold ideas into results, whether it's seeing inefficiencies in the floral supply chain and allowing people to order flowers directly from the end consumer, whether it's running for State Board of Education at the tender age of 25, whether it's starting schools to serve at-risk youth when I saw that they were falling through the cracks, or whether it's running and serving in United States Congress where I've taken on the hard issues and I'm now working to hold President Trump accountable. I know we can do better in the state of Colorado. We need innovative leadership. Now's the time for bold ideas. They're not going to come from Washington, they're going to come from us. And as your governor, I want to listen and I want to act. And together we can build a brighter future for everyone in our state. I'd be honored to have your support at caucus next week. You can find out more at polisforcolorado.com. Thank you.
And Mr. Barlow.
As I look at politics in Colorado, I see dynasties, I see lifelong politicians, and I see political insiders all. In a boom, that's fine. But Colorado history, the grassroots of Colorado, knows there's a bust in store. I'd like to make sure when we have that bust, we're level. I'd like to take the people who are doing wrong on the upturn and stop them now before we have to go after them on the downturn. I want to give opportunity for every single Colorado citizen to have an enjoyable life. I'm not going to give you the cookie. I'm going to give you every opportunity to earn it yourself. That's what government does. We do not give extra rights to people. We all have the same rights. And I want to make sure those same rights provide opportunities to all. In government, we know we're going fast right now, but as a race car driver knows, we need to pit sometimes and stop. We need to change our tires, fix the gas tank, and protect ourselves so we don't do harm on the road, and we want to finish this race. So let's protect Colorado. My name's Steve Barlock. I want to be the next governor of Colorado. You can go to barlockforcolorado.com or barlockforgovernor.com. And I, too, will be attending our caucus and our state assembly on the Republican Party. So thank you for the opportunity tonight, and we will see you soon. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to apply for the job with you. Thank you.
And Mr. Underwood.
I want to start by asking a question. And I want you to think about this. Do you know what the definition of insanity is? It means repeating something over and over again, expecting a different result. Now, we're all running for governor. And we're different. On the Democratic side, we have different, points of views about some stuff. And you need to think about who you're electing, because we're going to be talking about these same issues 5, 10 years from now, or on another political cycle. The time is now for you to make a choice and do something different and something new. We need bold leadership. We need new energy at the state capitol, because there are so many things that need to be fixed and so many people being left behind. I'm going through the caucus process. I appreciate your consideration, your vote. Please go to erikunderwood.com, and I also have some literature out there on the table for you to pick up and view as well. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. In the wake of the last few weeks, I went back and looked at the memorial at Columbine High School. And that memorial has a quote written in granite that says, "This day brought the world to its knees. But when we got up, what had changed?" I think in the past 2 weeks, the answer was nothing has changed. And that is not just true for the crisis around guns. That is true in this state for the crisis around education funding. That is true in this state for the crisis around infrastructure and transportation. That is true for the crisis of balancing development with energy. Right now, the question for Colorado is, in a moment when people don't quite believe that democracy works anymore, they don't really believe that good people can come together and solve big problems again, someone has to prove that that's not true. And no one is better positioned than Colorado to do that. We are a state of people who refuse to be divided. We've been crossing that divide for generations. It's time now to prove we can cross those divides again, and we can build a state that will be the envy of the rest of the country. My name is Mike Johnston. I'm running for governor. I would love to have your support at caucus. I'd love to have your support on the ballot. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, thank all of you for coming up and speaking with us today. We have some closing remarks real fast by Andrew Bondi, a local community activist with Fort Collins for Progress and one of the folks who helped organize this whole shindig.
Thank you, Nick. First off, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Give yourselves a round of applause. I mean, you're being involved in the democratic process right now. It's important. So, as some of you probably saw when you RSVP'd for this event, we have another one that's coming up here in 2 weeks. This was not just one candidate forum, because we got asked to do multiple. So we created a candidate forum series. So we have our Attorney General candidate forum will be coming up on March 18th, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., and it'll be over at Avogadrio's number. We've got 5 confirmed candidates from all of the parties that are being represented. So it should be a lot of fun. It's going to be really feisty. These folks are going to be the people's lawyer. They're ready to sue people. So let's go hear who they're going to be suing. So I wanted to thank all of the organizations that came together to help make today as a wonderful success. Pooter Education Association for helping us secure this wonderful and amazing facility and working flawlessly with the students here and the theater director and everything. I mean, this was being live streamed. It's amazing, everything along those lines. I want to thank the Strayer Center from CSU for helping to establish the format for this forum, also helping us to have a bit more of a nonpartisan, non-political position involved in all of this. They really took the lead on a lot of cutting through a lot of the red tape. When you bring a bunch of community organizations together, it kind of looks like it's coming with an agenda. They really helped to level the playing field in that regard so that we were, so we had all of the candidates out here and we really got the opportunity to see everyone's perspective involved in this. So, thank you. And then I'd also like to thank the community organizations who kind of came together to do the advertising, did some of the grunt work, things along those lines. It's Indivisible NOCO, Fort Collins for Progress, OFA Colorado, and the NOCO Now, Northern Colorado National Organization for Women. So I'd really like to thank all of them for being sponsors here today. And then one last thing I want to throw out there as a quick plug is that many of you are aware that we had a student walkout this last Tuesday. It was a pretty amazing event. The simple fact that no matter where you stand on the issue, the simple fact that we had that many students get up and get out there to draw attention and awareness to this problem and the fact that we need to solve it was absolutely breathtaking. I was up on stage working with the students, helping plan all the logistics and working with the police department, and it was just, it was very humbling. I'm also very hopeful for the future now. That being said, I'd like to let everybody know that we do have Allie Holton. She was the kind of the student leader that brought all of this together on Tuesday here tonight with us. And that she has every intention of bringing together a group of student leaders from each one of the various schools in the school district to meet with elected officials and to drive this home and make sure that we get real change here, be it locally just in PSD, in the state of Colorado as a whole, and I would not be surprised if she's going to be running for Congress here soon enough. So that being said, March 24th is the day that the Parkland survivors requested that we have a kind of a nationwide recognition of what occurred and the fact that this is never going to happen again. And that being said, there is a statewide march that's occurring down in Denver. If you'd like to get down there, we have, through Fort Collins for Progress and our community organizations, we've established busing down there. You can find tickets available on our website, focoprogress.org. That also being said, if you've got wee ones that you want to have come to this event, you don't really want to put them on a bus and send them to Denver, we're also doing a local rally up here in Fort Collins on the 24th. It'll be starting at 3 p.m. and it'll run until about 5 p.m. It'll be out in Old Town Square. Our hope is to work with some of our locally elected officials to be able to get them there to speak on the status of where we're at in the state of Colorado right now on the whole suite of issues that have been brought up in this, and really what we can do going forwards with it. You know, the students did an amazing job bringing attention to the fact that we need to do this and we need to get this fixed. So now it's time for us to get educated and to get mobilized. And that's kind of the next step in this entire process. So that being said, thank you all for coming out here today and getting educated on who, one of these individuals is likely going to be our next governor. I would be surprised if one of the candidates that was not here today ends up getting elected. So I would like to also think that we had part in helping make that happen. So thank you all for your time and drive safe.
Yeah, and sorry, one last thing I just wanted to plug again. March 6th is the caucuses. If you are registered with a party, get out, get engaged, get active. You can find your caucus locations if you're a Republican at larimergop.org. If you are a registered Democrat, larimerdems.org. Again, that's larimergop.org, larimerdems.org. And if you're one of the many unaffiliated voters in the state, not to worry, wait till June and you can vote in the primary for the first time. So how exciting. That being said, thank you all again to the candidates for coming out.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us. It's really fun event. Well organized. Cheers.